Hi, we are going to do 3.2 and 3.3 together, but this is just part one. So you'll see why here in a second, but we are going to be adding and subtracting rational numbers. So remember, rational numbers are numbers that can be written as a ratio or AKA fraction, and then we know we can transfer them to decimals. So rational numbers just mean any number that is a fraction or a decimal. So I can add and subtract rational numbers is our I can. We are going to do this over part one and part two. So hopefully after both lessons and both practice days, you will be able to say, I can add and subtract rational numbers. So today's key term is an additive inverse. Okay, so the opposite sign of a number. So 5 is the additive inverse of -5. Okay, so additive meaning add, and then inverse meaning opposite. Okay, so when we kind of add them together, they become 0. We sometimes call it a zero pair, but this time we're calling it the higher term, additive inverse. So we're going to do adding and subtracting decimals today, and then part two will be fractions. So we follow the same rules as integers. So if they're the same sign, we add them, keep the sign. If they're different signs, we subtract, keep the sign of the absolute value. And if it's subtraction, we add the opposite. So none of that changes. And then we need to make sure that we remember to line up the decimals first, then we can do our adding and subtracting. Okay, so this first one, I have same signs, I'm adding them together, so I'm just going to make sure I line up my decimals. So 12 and 3/10 plus 7 and 5/10, and then I can just add. So 8, 7, 8, 9, 1, make sure you bring your decimal down, and then because they were both negative, it stays negative. So 12 and 25/100 plus -13 and 4/10, opposite signs, so I'm going to subtract their absolute values. So remember, we put the larger absolute value on top, smaller absolute value on bottom. And if you need to line them up, you may have to add a 0, okay, because they weren't the same place value. This was tenths, this was hundredths, so I need to add a 0 to make it hundredths. Don't forget to borrow. This is where people make their biggest mistakes because they forget to add that 0 and they forget to borrow. So we get 5, 1, 1, 0, decimal. Greater absolute value was 13 and 4/10, so it is -1 and 15/100. Okay, so this is where I'd like you to pause, practice these three, do them on your own, and then push play when you're done. So this first one, the very first thing I'm going to do is add the opposite. That's my rule for subtraction. Now I can see this is +9, +17 and 4/10. They're the same sign. So I'm actually just going to add them together. But I need to add a 0 for my 9. So 4, that's 16. 2, bring my decimal down, and it stays positive because they are both positive. So -2.5, take away 6 and 8/10. I'm going to add the opposite. And notice as soon as I do that, they're the same sign. So 6 and 8/10 plus 2 and 5/10. So this is 13, 6, 7, 8, 9. Decimal brought down. Both were negative. So the answer is negative. 13 and 7, might take away 17 and 2/10. Add the opposite. They're different signs, so I'm going to subtract 17 and 2/10. Take away 13 and 0/10. So 2, 4, 0. Bring my decimal down. 17 had a greater absolute value, so it is -4 and 2/10. So things to remember, add zeros. Nope, I meant to say add zeros. Add zeros to line up decimals. I think that's really important for us to remember, is if we don't have the same place value, we have to add those zeros after the decimal. Okay, what questions do you have? What was confusing? Let me know in your form, and we will do fractions next time.